The galaxy had known peace for 900 years. It was not a gentle peace or a kind peace. It was the peace of fear. The Velanthari Empire ruled over 3,000 star systems. And every species that lived among the stars understood one simple truth. You did not fight the Velanthari. You did not argue with them. You bowed your head, paid your tribute, and prayed they would leave you alone. Humanity had learned this lesson when they first traveled beyond their solar system. They saw the massive imperial warships that could destroy entire planets. They watched as other species were crushed for the smallest acts of defiance. And they made a choice. They would survive. They would submit. They would wait. For 900 years, humans paid their taxes to the Empire. They stayed within the 12 star systems they were allowed to occupy. They smiled at imperial officers and called them honored guests. They taught their children that peace was precious and that some things were worth swallowing your pride for. Admiral Katie Ward had grown up in this world of quiet submission. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that came from years of careful diplomacy. She had never fired a weapon in combat. No human of her generation had. There had been no wars to fight, no enemies to face. The Empire kept the peace, and humanity kept its head down. Katie commanded the diplomatic escort vessel, Steadfast. It was a small ship, designed more for comfort than combat. Its weapons were old and mostly decorative. Its shields were adequate for deflecting space debris but little else. The crew of 200 treated every mission as a vacation. There was nothing to fear in the Empire's space. Nothing ever happened. Her current mission was simple. She was escorting the new human ambassador to a border station for the yearly treaty renewal. It was a ceremony. Nothing more. The same words would be spoken, the same documents would be signed, and humanity would have another year of peaceful submission. Katie did not mind the boring work. She had something that made every mission worthwhile. Her daughter Megan served as her executive officer. Megan was 26 years old, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's easy smile. She had joined the fleet because she wanted to see the stars, but she often talked about leaving the service someday. She wanted to be a teacher. She wanted to help children learn about the universe and dream of better things. Every evening, Katie and Megan would share dinner in the captain's quarters. They would talk about everything and nothing. Megan would tell stories about the crew, about the young officers who were falling in love, about the cook who kept trying new recipes that nobody liked. Katie would listen and laugh and feel grateful for these quiet moments with her child. On the third day of the mission, they were crossing through neutral space when the sensors detected another ship approaching. Katie was not worried. They had filed their flight plan with Imperial authorities. Everyone knew where they were and why. The ship that appeared was a Velanthari patrol cruiser called the Burning Claw. It was 3 times the size of the Steadfast, with weapons that could tear through their hull like paper. Its commander was a young officer named Vectran, who had spent his entire career looking for glory. He had heard rumors that human ships were carrying illegal technology. He saw a chance to make a name for himself. The Steadfast sent the standard greeting. They transmitted their identification codes and their mission documents. They did everything right, everything they had been taught to do for 900 years. Vectran did not respond. Katie was standing near the bridge door when the first shot hit. She had stepped away from her chair to grab a datapad from the adjacent corridor. It was such a small thing. Such an ordinary moment. She heard Megan laugh at something one of the officers said. She heard the hum of the ship's engines. She heard the soft beep of the sensors. Then she heard nothing but fire and screaming. The shot tore through the bridge like a burning knife. Consoles exploded. Metal twisted and shattered. The air filled with smoke and the smell of burning flesh. 37 people died in that single moment. 37 lives ended without warning, without reason, without mercy. Katie was thrown against the corridor wall. Her ears rang, her vision blurred. She could feel blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead, but she was alive. She pulled herself up and stumbled toward the bridge. The door was gone, ripped away by the blast. She stepped through the opening and saw what remained of her command. Bodies lay everywhere. Fires burned in the wreckage. The view screen was cracked but still working. showing the Velanthari ship moving closer, preparing to board. Katie saw her daughter lying near the captain's chair. She ran to Megan and fell to her knees beside her. The young woman's eyes were open but empty. A piece of shrapnel had struck her chest. There was blood everywhere. So much blood, spreading across the floor in a dark pool. Katie gathered her daughter in her arms. She held her close and felt the warmth leaving her body. She whispered her name over and over, begging her to wake up, promising that everything would be okay. But Megan did not move. Megan did not breathe. Megan was gone. Something changed inside Katie Ward in that moment. Something that had been sleeping for 900 years woke up. It was not grief, though grief was there. It was not fear, though fear was there too. It was something older and darker. Something that humanity had buried deep inside themselves when they chose submission over extinction. It was rage. The Velanthari ship was sending boarding parties. They expected to find a crippled vessel full of terrified humans ready to surrender. They expected easy prisoners and a quick victory. They expected the same obedience that humanity had shown for 9 centuries. They did not expect Katie Ward. She laid her daughter's body down gently and closed her eyes. She kissed her forehead one last time. Then she stood up and walked to what remained of the command console. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was calm. Her heart was cold. The Velanthari were about to learn that some prices were too high to pay. Some lines should never be crossed. And some mothers should never be given a reason to fight. Katie Ward was done submitting. She was done bowing. She was done being afraid. Now she was going to teach the Empire what humanity had forgotten about themselves, and the lesson would be written in fire. Katie Ward had never been a warrior. She had spent her entire career avoiding conflict, smiling at imperial officers, and pretending that submission was the same as wisdom. She had taught her daughter that peace was worth any price. She had believed it herself. Now her daughter was dead, and Katie discovered that some prices were too high. She worked quickly at the damaged console. Her fingers moved across the controls with a speed she did not know she possessed. Around her, the surviving crew members were crying, screaming, trying to help the wounded. Nobody was watching the captain. Nobody saw what she was doing. Deep in the Steadfast's computer core, there were files that were never meant to be opened. They were sealed by treaty, classified at the highest level, protected by passwords that only a handful of people knew. Katie was one of those people. Every human captain was given the codes when they took command, along with strict orders to never use them unless humanity itself was threatened. Katie decided that humanity was threatened. Her humanity. Her daughter's humanity. The humanity of every person who had ever been forced to bow before the Empire. She entered the codes one by one. Warning messages flashed across the screen. Are you sure? This action cannot be undone. Authorization required. She cleared them all. She accepted every warning. She unlocked every seal. The Steadfast shuddered as systems that had been dormant for centuries came online. Hidden panels slid open along the hull, revealing weapons that the Empire had forbidden humanity from building. Energy coils that had never been charged began to hum with power. Targeting systems that had never been activated started scanning for enemies. The Velanthari boarding shuttle was halfway to the Steadfast when the first beam struck it. The shuttle vanished in a flash of white light, its crew dead before they knew what happened. On the bridge of the burning claw, Vectran stared at his sensors in disbelief. The readings made no sense. The human ship was supposed to be helpless. It was supposed to be harmless. Katie opened a communication channel to the enemy vessel. Her face appeared on Vectran's view screen, and he saw something that made his blood run cold. There was no fear in her eyes. There was no submission. There was only a terrible calm, the calm of someone who had already accepted what she was about to do. You killed my daughter, Katie said. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. Her name was Megan. She was 26 years old. She wanted to be a teacher. Vectran tried to respond, tried to explain, tried to threaten. Katie cut off his transmission with a single touch. You do not get to speak, she said to the empty air. You do not get to justify. You only get to die. The Steadfast opened fire with everything it had. Weapons that the Empire thought were impossible tore through the Burning Claw's shields like they were made of paper. Beams of concentrated energy cut through the hull, slicing the ship into pieces. Explosions rippled across the vessel as fuel lines ignited and power cores overloaded. Vectran died screaming, still trying to understand how this was possible. His crew died with him. 200 Velanthari warriors who had never known defeat. The Burning Claw broke apart and scattered across the void. Nothing left but burning debris and frozen bodies. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, Katie sat down in her ruined captain's chair and stared at the view screen. The stars looked the same as they always had, cold and distant and uncaring. They did not know that everything had changed. They did not know that 900 years of peace had just ended. Katie looked at her daughter's body, still lying where she had left her. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. She wanted to curl up beside Megan and let the darkness take her. But she could not do any of those things. Not yet. There was still work to be done. She activated the ship's communication array and set it to broadcast on every frequency, every channel, every wavelength that could carry a signal across the stars. Her message would reach human colonies within hours. It would reach the Empire within days. It would reach every corner of the galaxy within weeks. She looked into the camera and spoke clearly. My name is Admiral Katie Ward of the Human Confederation. 3 hours ago, a Velanthari patrol ship attacked my vessel without warning and without provocation. They murdered 37 members of my crew, including my daughter, Lieutenant Commander Megan Ward. She paused and took a breath. Her eyes were dry. Her voice was steady. For 900 years, humanity has submitted to the Empire. We have paid tribute. We have followed orders. We have taught our children to be afraid. We did this because we believed it was the only way to survive. We were wrong. The surviving crew members had gathered behind her, watching in silence. Some of them were wounded. All of them were grieving. But none of them tried to stop her. None of them told her she was making a mistake. They had seen what she had seen. They had lost what she had lost. I have destroyed the ship that attacked us. Every member of its crew is dead. This is not a request for justice. This is not a plea for mercy. This is a statement of fact and a promise of what is to come. Katie leaned forward, and her eyes seemed to burn with a fire that had been waiting 9 centuries to ignite. To the Velanthari Empire, I say this. You have taken something precious from me. You have taken something precious from all of humanity. And now I am coming for you. Not to negotiate, not to surrender. I am coming to burn your worlds and shatter your fleets, and teach you the lesson you should have learned long ago. She stood up slowly, her shadow falling across the camera. Humanity is done being afraid. Humanity is done bowing. You wanted war? You have it. And when I am finished with you, the galaxy will remember what happens when you push a mother too far. The transmission ended. Katie turned off the console and walked back to her daughter's body. She knelt down and took Megan's cold hand in her own. I am sorry, she whispered. I am sorry I could not protect you. I am sorry I taught you to accept a world that did not deserve your kindness. But I promise you this, my darling girl, your death will not be meaningless. Your death will be the spark that sets the universe on fire. She stayed there for a long time, holding her daughter's hand and watching the stars burn in the darkness. Somewhere across the galaxy, her message was spreading. Somewhere, humans were hearing her words and feeling something stir inside them. Something that had been sleeping for 900 years. And somewhere, the Velanthari Empire was about to learn that they had made a terrible mistake. They had fired at the wrong female. Katie Ward's message reached Earth on a quiet morning in late autumn. The leaves were falling in the capital city, and people were going about their ordinary lives. Children walked to school. Workers traveled to their jobs. Couples sat in cafes and talked about small things. Nobody knew that everything was about to change. The Council of Nations had not met in emergency session for over 200 years. There had been no need. The Empire kept the peace, and humanity kept its silence. But when Katie's transmission arrived, every leader on Earth stopped what they were doing and watched. They saw the burning bridge. They saw the bodies. They saw the cold fire in Katie Ward's eyes as she declared war on the most powerful force in the galaxy. Within 6 hours, the council chamber was full. Presidents and prime ministers, generals and admirals, scientists and diplomats. They came from every nation on Earth, and from the 12 colonies scattered across human space. They came because they knew that this moment would decide the fate of their entire species. Admiral Ben Cortez stood at the center of the chamber. He was 40 years old, with broad shoulders and calm brown eyes. He was the youngest fleet commander in human history, though the fleet he commanded had never seen real combat. Like everyone else, he had spent his career waiting for a war that he believed would never come. He played Katie's transmission on the massive screen behind him. The chamber fell silent as they watched. Some of the leaders wept. Others stared in shock. A few nodded slowly, as if they had always known this day would arrive. Admiral Ward's daughter was killed in an unprovoked attack, Ben said when the transmission ended. 37 other crew members died with her. The Empire has not apologized. They have not offered explanation. Instead, they have demanded that we turn over Admiral Ward for execution and pay reparations for the destruction of their patrol ship. A murmur of anger rippled through the chamber. Ben waited for it to pass. For 900 years, we have lived under the Empire's shadow. We have smiled and bowed and pretended that this was peace. But it was never peace. It was fear. It was survival. And now we must decide whether survival is enough. He touched a control on his podium, and the screen changed. It showed images that most of the people in the room had never seen before. Massive shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt, where thousands of workers built vessels in secret. Underground factories on Mars, producing weapons that were forbidden by treaty. Training facilities on distant moons, where soldiers learned to fight a war that might never happen. When our ancestors submitted to the Empire, they made a choice, Ben continued. But they also made a promise. They promised that one day, when the time was right, humanity would rise again. They started building in secret. Generation after generation, they added to what came before. They hid it from the Empire. They hid it from their own people. They waited for the moment when we would need it. The images kept changing. Ships of every size and configuration. Weapons that used principles of science the Empire had never discovered. Soldiers in powered armor that could tear through steel with their bare hands. An army that had been growing in the shadows for 9 centuries, waiting for the call. This is what our ancestors built for us, Ben said. 300 capital ships, 2,000 support vessels, weapons that can match anything the Empire possesses, soldiers who have trained their entire lives for this moment. They called it the Omega Contingency. It was meant to be our last hope. Our final answer, the thing we would use if submission was no longer possible. He looked around the chamber at the faces of the most powerful people in human space. He saw fear in some eyes. He saw doubt in others. But in most, he saw something that had been buried for far too long. He saw hope. Katie Ward did not start a war, Ben said. She gave us permission to finish one. The Empire thinks we are weak. They think we are afraid. They think that 900 years of submission has broken our spirit. Let us show them how wrong they are. The debate lasted for hours. Some argued that they should apologize, that they should hand over Katie and beg for forgiveness. They said that war with the Empire was suicide, that no species had ever won against the Velanthari, that humanity would be destroyed. Others argued that submission had gone on long enough. They said that if they surrendered now, they would surrender forever. They said that their ancestors had not built this army just to let it rot in secret. They said that Katie Ward had shown them what courage looked like, and they would be cowards to turn away. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Every leader, from every nation and colony, voted for war. There was no cheering when the results were announced. There was no celebration. They all knew what this meant. They all knew the price that would be paid, but they also knew that some things were worth fighting for, and some things were worth dying for. Within 72 hours, the hidden shipyards opened their doors. Ships that had never seen the light of the stars emerged into the void, their hulls gleaming with fresh paint, and their weapons humming with power. Soldiers who had trained in secret reported to their stations, ready at last to do what they had prepared for their entire lives. Ben Cortez took command of the main fleet. He had studied tactics and strategy for 20 years, learning from simulations and war games. Now he would finally put that knowledge to use against a real enemy. But the flagship would not be his to command. That honor belonged to someone else. Katie Ward arrived at the fleet assembly point 3 days after the vote. Her ship had limped home on backup engines, carrying the bodies of the fallen and the survivors who had witnessed the beginning of everything. She looked older than she had before. Thinner, there were shadows under her eyes that had not been there a week ago. But when she stepped onto the bridge of the newly commissioned flagship Defiance, she stood straight and tall. The crew saluted her as she walked to the captain's chair. She looked at them, these young men and women who were ready to follow her into the fire, and she felt something she thought she had lost forever. She felt hope. Set course for the Empire's border, she said. It is time to remind the galaxy who we are. The fleet moved as one, 300 ships cutting through the darkness like a blade. Behind them, humanity watched and waited. Some prayed for victory. Some prayed for mercy. All of them knew that the universe would never be the same. The long sleep was over. Humanity was awake, and the Empire was about to learn that the species they had dismissed as weak and harmless was neither of those things. They were angry. They were united. And they were coming. The first battle of the war happened at a place called the Theron Cluster. It was a supply hub for the Imperial fleet, a station where ships refueled and repaired before continuing their patrols. 300 Velenthari warships guarded the station, confident that no enemy would dare attack such a heavily defended position. Admiral Chris Delaney led the assault with a task force of 50 human ships. The Imperial commanders laughed when they saw the size of the attacking force. 6-1 odds in their favor. This would not be a battle. This would be a slaughter. They were right about the slaughter. They were wrong about who would be doing the killing. Human ships moved through space in ways the Empire had never seen. They twisted and turned at impossible angles, their engines burning with a fire that seemed to defy physics itself. Imperial gunners tried to track them, tried to lock on, but the targets were never where they expected them to be. The first Velenthari ship died without ever firing a shot. A beam of concentrated light pierced its shields as if they were not there, and cut through the reactor core. The explosion lit up the void like a new star. Then the drones came. Thousands of small machines poured out of the human ships, each one carrying a warhead that could punch through armor. They swarmed around the Imperial fleet like angry insects, too small to hit, too fast to avoid. One by one, the Velenthari ships began to die. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 287 Imperial warships had been destroyed. The remaining 13 had surrendered, their crews too shocked to continue fighting. The supply station was in human hands. Chris Delaney lost 4 ships. 1,200 humans died that day. It was a price he had been prepared to pay. But as he walked through the corridors of the captured station, stepping over the bodies of fallen enemies, he felt no joy. War was never joyful. It was only necessary. The news of Theron spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had lived under Imperial rule for thousands of years watched in disbelief. The Velenthari, the unbeatable, the all-powerful, had been defeated by humans. The weak ones, the quiet ones, the ones who had bowed for 900 years. Other battles followed. At Nexar Prime, Admiral Lisa Trent destroyed an Imperial shipyard that had been building warships for 5 centuries. At the Void of Shadows, Captain Danny Reeves led a squadron of fighters through an asteroid field and ambushed an Imperial convoy, capturing enough supplies to feed the human fleet for 6 months. At Burning Sky Station, Commander Maria Santos held a defensive position against an enemy force 10 times her size, refusing to retreat until reinforcements arrived. But it was Katie Ward who became the legend. She led the Defiance from one engagement to the next, always at the front, always in the thickest fighting. Her ship bore the scars of a dozen battles, its hull patched and repaired so many times that some sections were more metal plating than original armor. Her crew called her the Iron Admiral. Her enemies called her the Demon of Earth. She did not care what anyone called her. She only cared about one thing: the Imperial homeworld. Valanthar Prime was the heart of the Empire. It was where the High Council ruled from their ancient palace. It was where the Valanthari had first risen to power, long before they conquered the stars. It was the most heavily defended world in the galaxy, protected by a fleet of 2,000 warships and orbital stations that could destroy entire armadas. Katie did not care. She gathered the largest human fleet ever assembled: 250 capital ships, 1,500 support vessels. Every soldier, every pilot, every engineer who could hold a weapon. They came because she asked. They came because they believed in her. They came because they wanted to see the Empire fall. The Battle of Valanthar Prime began at dawn, by the local time of the planet below. The Imperial fleet formed a wall of ships between the planet and the approaching humans, confident in their numbers and their power. The High Council watched from their palace, sipping wine and waiting for the entertainment to begin. Katie opened a channel that was broadcast to every screen on the planet. Her face appeared above the capital city, projected onto the clouds themselves by the power of human technology. 900 years ago, she said, you taught us to fear you. You broke our spirit. You made us believe that we could never rise. Today, I am returning the lesson. The Defiance surged forward, leading the charge directly into the heart of the Imperial fleet. Ships exploded on all sides. Energy beams cut through the darkness. Debris filled the void like a storm of metal and fire. Katie stood on her bridge, watching the chaos unfold around her. She did not flinch when a near miss shook the ship. She did not blink when the lights flickered and alarms screamed. She only watched and waited and gave her orders in a voice as calm as still water. The human fleet tore through the Imperial defenses like a knife through flesh. Ships that had guarded this world for centuries died in minutes. The orbital stations, those mighty fortresses that had never been breached, fell one by one to weapons they could not understand. When the last Imperial ship surrendered, Katie turned her attention to the planet below. The High Council had fled their palace, but they could not flee the world. There was nowhere left to run. She landed with 10,000 Marines at her back. They marched through streets that had never known the sound of foreign boots. They walked past statues of ancient conquerors and monuments to forgotten victories. They came to the palace and kicked down its golden doors. Katie found the one she was looking for hiding in a basement chamber. His name was Lord Vectron, the father of the officer who had killed her daughter. He had approved the patrol. He had given the orders. He had started everything. He was on his knees when she found him, weeping and begging for mercy. He promised her wealth and power. He promised her anything she wanted. He said he was sorry. He said he did not know. Katie looked at him with eyes that held no pity. Her name was Megan, she said quietly. She was 26 years old. She wanted to be a teacher. She wanted to help children dream of better things. She raised her sidearm and pointed it at his head. She was everything good in the universe. And you took her from me because your son wanted glory. Lord Vectran closed his eyes and prayed to gods he had never believed in. Remember her, Katie said. Remember her name. Remember what she wanted to be. And carry that memory with you into whatever comes next. The shot echoed through the empty halls of the fallen palace. Lord Vectran slumped to the floor, his prayers unanswered, his life ended. Katie holstered her weapon and walked away. Behind her, the Marines began securing the building. Outside, the human fleet maintained their watch over the conquered world. The war was not over yet. But the Empire was broken. The head had been cut off, and the body would soon follow. Katie Ward stood in the ruins of the High Council chamber and looked up at the alien sky. Somewhere among those stars, her daughter was waiting. Somewhere, Megan was watching what her mother had done. I told you I was coming, Katie whispered to the void. I told you I would burn their worlds and shatter their fleets. I kept my promise. A single tear rolled down her cheek. The first she had allowed herself since the day her daughter died. I kept my promise, sweetheart. I hope you are proud of me. The war lasted 18 months. 18 months to tear down an empire that had stood for 900 years. 18 months of battles and blood and sacrifice. When the last imperial stronghold surrendered, when the last Valanthary flag came down, the galaxy held its breath and waited to see what would happen next. Many expected humanity to become the new rulers. They had proven themselves the strongest force in the known universe. They had weapons that no other species could match. They had soldiers who fought with a fury that terrified even their allies. The galaxy braced itself for a new era of submission. A new empire with human masters instead of Valanthary ones. But Katie Ward had other plans. The Assembly of Free Worlds met for the first time on a neutral space station that had once been an imperial trading post. Representatives from 100 different species gathered in a great circular chamber, uncertain and afraid. They had lived under the Empire for so long that they did not remember what freedom felt like. They did not know how to govern themselves. They looked to the humans for guidance, expecting orders and demands. Katie stood before them wearing a simple uniform with no medals or ribbons. She had refused all honors that the human government tried to give her. She did not want to be celebrated. She did not want to be remembered as a conqueror. She wanted only one thing, and it was not power. We did not fight this war for conquest, she said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. We did not shed blood and sacrifice lives so that humanity could sit on the same throne the Valanthary once occupied. We fought because they took something precious from us and expected us to accept it. We fought because 900 years of submission had made us forget who we were. She looked around the room at the alien faces watching her. Some were familiar species she had worked with during the war. Others were strange and unknown. Creatures from distant corners of the galaxy who had traveled far to witness this moment. I lost my daughter, Katie continued. She was everything to me. When she died, I wanted to burn the galaxy down. I wanted revenge. I wanted the Valanthary to suffer, as I was suffering, and for a time, that rage carried me forward. It gave me strength when I had none. It kept me fighting when all I wanted to do was give up. Her voice grew softer, and the assembly leaned forward to hear. But revenge is not enough to build a future. Anger is not enough to create peace. My daughter did not dream of conquest. She dreamed of teaching children. She dreamed of helping them grow and learn and become better than the generation before. If I honor her memory with blood and tyranny, then I have failed her. I have become the very thing that killed her. She straightened her shoulders and spoke clearly. I am asking humanity to step back, not to rule, but to serve, not to command, but to protect. Let this assembly govern the galaxy. Let every species have a voice. Let us build something new together. Something that is not based on fear or submission, but on cooperation and respect. The chamber erupted in noise. Some representatives were shouting in agreement. Others were shouting in confusion. A few were simply weeping, overwhelmed by what they were hearing. The humans, the most powerful species in the galaxy, were offering to give up their power. It was unthinkable. It was impossible, but it was happening. Admiral Ben Cortez stepped forward to stand beside Katie. He had become the voice of the human military during the war, the calm presence that balanced her fierce determination. Together, they had won 100 battles. Now they would try to win the peace. We will help you build this new order, Ben said. We will share our technology and our knowledge. We will defend any member of this assembly who is threatened. But we will not rule you. We will not tell you how to live. The days of empire are over. The days of freedom have begun. The vote took 3 days. Every species debated among themselves. Every representative weighed the risks and the possibilities. In the end, the Assembly of Free Worlds was born with unanimous approval. Humanity would serve as its protectors, not its masters. Chris Delaney took command of the peacekeeping fleet. His job was to patrol the former Imperial territories and ensure that no species tried to fill the vacuum left by the Velenthari. It was difficult work, thankless work, but he did it without complaint. He believed in what they were building. Lisa Trent became the human ambassador to the Assembly. She spent her days negotiating treaties and trade agreements, building the foundations of a new galactic economy. She had fought in a dozen battles during the war. Now she fought with words instead of weapons. And she found that it was just as exhausting. Ben Cortez stayed on Earth, working to rebuild human society after the upheaval of war. 900 years of submission had left deep wounds. People had forgotten how to think for themselves, how to dream without limits, how to hope without fear. He established schools and programs to help them remember. He knew it would take generations, but he was patient. And Katie Ward retired. She left the military without ceremony, turning down every offer of position and power. She returned to Earth and bought a small house by the ocean, far from the cities and the noise. It was a quiet place, surrounded by trees and flowers, with a view of the waves that stretched all the way to the horizon. She planted a garden in the backyard. Roses and lilies and sunflowers, the same flowers that Megan had loved as a child. She tended them every morning, pulling weeds and watering the soil, watching them grow toward the sun. Sometimes old friends would visit. Ben came when he could spare the time. Chris sent messages from the far reaches of space. Lisa brought news of the Assembly and the progress they were making. Katie listened to all of it, nodding and smiling and asking questions. But she never offered to help. She never offered to return. Her war was over. Her rage had burned itself out, leaving behind something softer and quieter. She had kept her promise to Megan. She had shaken the stars and brought down an empire. Now it was time for others to build what came next. On the anniversary of Megan's death, Katie walked to the edge of her garden and looked up at the night sky. The stars were bright and clear, more beautiful than she had ever noticed during all her years in space. Each one was a sun, surrounded by worlds, inhabited by people who were now free because of what she had done. "I hope you can see this, sweetheart," she whispered. "I hope you can see what we built. Not just the war, but what came after. The peace, the freedom, the chance for everyone to dream like you used to dream." A shooting star streaked across the darkness, bright and brief and beautiful. Katie smiled. "I miss you every day," she said. "Every single day, I think about you. I think about your laugh and your smile, and the way you always saw the best in people. You made me want to be better. You made me want to build a universe worthy of your kindness." She wiped a tear from her cheek and took a deep breath. "I do not know if I succeeded. I do not know if what we created will last. But I tried. I tried as hard as I could, for as long as I could. And now I am tired, baby. I am so tired." The waves crashed against the shore below. The wind rustled through the garden, making the flowers dance. "But every morning, I wake up and I tend your garden. I watch your flowers grow. And I remember that even after the darkest night, the sun always rises. That is what you taught me, Megan. That is what I will never forget." 2-2. Katie Ward stood alone under the stars. An old woman now, with gray hair and wrinkled hands, and a heart that had been broken and healed 1,000 times. Behind her, the galaxy she had saved continued to turn. New worlds were being settled. New alliances were being formed. New children were being born who would never know the fear of imperial rule. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the story was still being told. The story of the empire that fired at the wrong female. The story of the mother who shook the stars. The story of the single shot that ended 900 years of peace and began a new age of freedom. It was a story that would be remembered forever. Katie smiled one last time, then turned and walked back to her house. Tomorrow, she would tend her garden. Tomorrow, she would watch the sunrise. Tomorrow, she would remember. But tonight, she would rest. She had earned it.